I'm Fox 26 meteorologist John Dawson. This is our YouTube tropical update. Glad you found us here. If you don't normally check out Fox 26 channel here on YouTube, you're encouraged to do that more often, maybe even to subscribe if you'd like to. The tropical information, of course, is my favorite part. There's other weather information and some other stories you might find interesting. But there's a lot to talk about in the tropics, and we're doing it every day of hurricane season. And at this point in time, there's things happening in the Atlantic Basin and there's things happening in the Pacific Basin. And I just want to touch real quick for our Houston area folks before I dive into what's happening over in the Pacific, and then we'll circle back around to this again here in a minute. But just a quick sort of note that this area that the National Hurricane Center has been watching for future development has been increased now to 40% chance in the next 7 days that this could become tropical. So the area is over here near the Bahamas. It's going to cross over this sort of tropical wave and then perhaps become a little bit better organized. And at this point, well, I'm going to save that. I told you I was going to talk a little bit more about the Pacific. So we'll come back, we'll circle back a little bit to what's happening in the Gulf, or what could be happening in the Gulf in just a minute. But Hilary is certainly what's getting everyone's attention right now, and rightly so, as it is a monster of a hurricane at a Category 4, but it is expected to weaken before it begins to make a landfall. So that's going to be the good news. We'll just let it sit out here and grow for a while and become a big storm and not worry too much about it at this point on where it is. It's the future of where it's headed, and it's the rain that it's bringing that's going to be the main concern. It's not necessarily these powerful winds. It's the rain that's going to be what we're really going to be focused on. So when we take a look at this rain, you'll notice, of course, right around the center there, very heavy rainfall happening. But watch how these outer bands are getting kicked way out in front of it, already beginning to impact the Baja Peninsula there, a part of Mexico, and they're going to continue to have these bands of rain that are throwing rain well out ahead of this center. So when we're talking about making landfall, we're always referencing the center of the storm and not when the rains really begin. So when we start talking about some times here in a minute, keep that in mind, that all the rain is going to be well ahead of that. So here's the 4 p.m. update. Again, Friday, 4 p.m. If you're just checking in with us, this is what the National Hurricane Center has just released. The winds have actually weakened just a little bit, but still very strong. It's a Category 4, 130-mile-an-hour winds. It does look like moving forward, we're expecting the winds to continue to drop. A lot of that having to do with the fact that the water that is now interacting and will continue to interact with will be cooler. So that cooler water doesn't provide that fuel that it needs to really burn. It's stronger, staying its intensity. And as it continues to get closer to the Baja Peninsula, of course, it starts to interact with that land even more, and that starts to mess up with sort of the dynamics that really drive a system to keep strong and to keep moving. But for sure, it looks like it could make a landfall as a Category 1 hurricane or just below a Category 1. A very powerful tropical storm is the possibilities as well. And it looks like that landfall will be Sunday afternoon along the Baja Peninsula. You'll notice that this track is pretty narrow. That's showing some pretty consistent on where we expect this track to go. By Monday, tropical storm, and really the center begins to get into the United States. But remember, we talked about that rain getting pushed out well ahead of that. And we'll see that in some of our computer modeling here in just a moment. So the movement right now is to the northwest at around 12 miles an hour. We're continuing to expect it to weaken, but still create quite a bit of rain and possibly some flooding scenarios. So here's kind of what we're looking at. We're going to do two things here. We're going to start off by talking about Hilary and the rainfall that's associated with it, and then we're going to be looking at southeast Texas and that tropical wave on where it might be bringing some rain as well. Two different computer models that we're going to look at. We're starting with the GFS, which is also known as the American model, and then we'll show the European. So the GFS is just piling on the rain, minimum of 5, 6, maybe even 8 inches of rain that's going to be happening. I'm pausing this at Wednesday, so The majority of the rain will be done with Hilary by the time we get into Tuesday and into Wednesday. And then this is when things begin to fire up a little bit more. And our GFS model is putting the bulk of the rain to the south of Houston and much more into South Texas as opposed to Southeast Texas. As a matter of fact, it's keeping things a little bit dry for us here in the Houston area as far as what that GFS model does. But you can see it continues to keep things well to the south and even into Mexico more, the heavier rain than it does for the state of Texas. So now let's show that European model, the Euro, and that's going to again put a lot of rain with Hilary. You'll see that continuing to pile up anywhere from 4 to 6 inches, maybe even as much as 8. Very similar path, similar rainfall. This whatever's left of Hilary will continue to get skirted around to the north and really end up in Canada. I've had a few people ask, is there any possibilities that Hilary or what was left of Hilary would really be impacting us over here in Texas? And that ridge, that dome of high pressure is going to prevent that. It's going to continue to push it up to some other areas of the country that really do need some rain, but hopefully it doesn't happen too fast and fall too quick. Here also we're seeing the European model push the bulk of the rain down to South Texas more than Southeast Texas, but we have more included in there where we're certainly looking for some rain. That'll also bring some clouds and also for some cooler temperatures. So if you're in the Houston area, this continues to look good in the fact that it's improving what we have. It's just not giving us this rain. It's keeping a little further to the south. And we don't want any sort of a really formal tropical cyclone that's strong, but a tropical depression is certainly something that is possible and probably favored more than anything else right now, a tropical depression. And that will bring some rain and some stronger gusty winds for the folks down near the center of it, down in South Texas. We could see that as well. So the excessive rainfall outlook from the Weather Prediction Center is definitely focused very much on our southwestern portions of the U.S. Just something to keep in mind is that this is a NOAA product, and so they are only forecasting for the United States. Obviously, there will be plenty of rain if you're concerned. If your concern is for the Baja Peninsula or even northwestern portions of Mexico, yes, there's going to be. It's not going to be just magically cut off here. It's just that our graphics are specifically designed from NOAA for the United States. So that's why they're going to be focused in sort of those lines drawn right there with the international border. Here's what we're looking at when we get into Saturday. Here's where we're seeing quite a bit of flooding possibilities for the southern and southeastern corner of the U.S., continuing to look for Arizona as well as some possibilities of flooding and into Nevada and even up into Utah. Any of those possibilities could see some flooding. Again, we're 40% chance, numerous areas could see some flooding. And then when we get into Sunday, those inches of rain have continued to pile on, and 70% chance that we'll see some of that flooding. So this terrain is relatively dry. It's got some elevation changes, so the mudslides are a concern, just that flash flooding concern when that water gets kind of wedged into a very small place. So we're talking inches and inches of rain as a possibility, and normally in August you just see less than an inch of rain for many of these places where they're looking for inches of rain. So this is certainly going to be an area over the weekend that gets a lot of attention because of all of the rain that's being forecasted. Houston could take a lot more of that rain than what those parts of the country and other parts of the country could as well, could really absorb that and take some more of that rain, even though it has certainly been dry for those folks as well. So as expected, we're switching back our discussions now to the Atlantic Basin. We get to this time of August on our chart here and things begin to really become active, and that's exactly what we're seeing. We've talked a little bit about this area. 40% chance over the next 7 days. Currently the tropical wave is more or less in the Bahamas or near the Bahamas. It's going to continue to track become maybe organized. As I mentioned, right now, tropical depression is somewhat favored, and headed into South Texas is kind of what we're looking at. But look at these other areas the Hurricane Center is also keeping an eye on. 70% chance that we could see this low pressure system develop into a tropical cyclone. We've got another spot where it's a 40% chance, maybe even in the next 2 days, that could develop into a tropical cyclone. And then one more spot even where we've got a 30% chance over 7 days that we could have another system. And for the most part, not as much of a concern with impact with the U.S. This one would be certain we would want to watch, but again, it's a little less likely to turn into anything right now, but certainly still keeping an eye on things. So here's what we know about that tropical wave coming into the Gulf of Mexico. That's the facts. That's what we know. That's going to increase some moisture all across the Gulf and all across the Gulf states. That could lead to more clouds, certainly could lead to some rain chances as well, and also some slightly cooler temperatures. Tuesday through Friday, maybe even as early as Monday, kind of the time frame that we're looking at. We don't know the exact track or intensity. As I mentioned, it's favored to be a little bit more like a tropical depression right now, headed towards South Texas, maybe what we're expecting. So that kind of answers a little bit more of those questions, but we'll keep an eye on things. And we could click a few more names off this list in the next week pretty quickly because of all those areas that we're watching. 4 areas in the Atlantic that the Hurricane Center is watching, so we could check off 2 or 3 of these pretty quick. I don't think all 4 areas are going to be turning into a tropical cyclone, but it's certainly going to be monitored for sure. I hope you're already following me on Instagram, and if you're not, I'm right here at John Dawson Fox 26. If you want to find my hurricane preparedness videos, they're here on YouTube. Search the YouTube bar for meteorologist John Dawson. You're going to find my channel, a lot of preps there to kind of get you ready for hurricane season. So if you're someone that's over in that California area or southwestern portions of the U.S. and you need a quick update, look at some of those guides in there. I give you some of the basics on what you need, some places that you can find some already pre-made supplies and things like that. Again, if you're on YouTube, search the YouTube bar for meteorologist John Dawson. Otherwise, check me out on Instagram. I'm at John Dawson Fox 26. I'll be back here tomorrow afternoon with another update on the tropics.